Welcome to the Prophecy Club. Our topic, an interesting one. I'm going to say it this way. America just crossed a red line. We've been watching for this, and apparently it is about to arrive. As you recall, many times I've given you this summary of active prophecies, but the one I want to call your attention to is this one. We got 13 prophecies that say that the dollar is going to fall, such as Dana Coverstone. A lot of you really love him, and Shane Warren, Pastor Massey, Prophet Marie Sklar, Brandon Biggs, Chris Reed, Chris Turner, and that's not all of them. They all say the dollar is going to fall, but we all wonder, when is this going to happen? Well, in some ways we like to think it won't happen. But the problem is, it's probably, and this is the point of the program today, it's probably very close. I can't give you an exact date, but I can tell you that part of one of the articles I'm going to read is kind of hinting it could be in July. So, make your preparations. Okay, so Shane Warren said that when oil starts being sold in another currency other than the dollar, that's going to crash the dollar. And he said it would, and of course that happened June the 4th, 2024, when Saudi Arabia stopped requiring dollars for the purchase of their oil. But nothing's happened yet. Then, what his prophecy was really saying is really oil is at the heart of the prophecy. Well, the dollar falls due to the change in oil. Well, la-di-da. So here's what I did. One of you, thank you very much for your forwarded emails and the links you send me. They're very, very helpful. Anyway, so Turkey just sold its gold, and here's why that should scare you. One of you sent this in to me. Thank you very much. But as a result of this, confirming it, I did a little search on Google, pulled it up through the AI, you know how that works, and I said, news, Turkey selling gold. Bring me up the articles talking about Turkey selling gold. Here's what it said. The Central Bank of Turkey sold and wrapped roughly 58 to 60 tons of gold. Wow. That's a lot. That's $8 billion. Let me put that into perspective. Our national debt is $37 trillion. That's a lot of money worth of gold. This emergency measure was taken to defend the collapsing lira and secure foreign currency following the onset of the military conflict in the Middle East, specifically Iran. Why Turkey sold its gold. Now, this is the important part. Currency defense. The outbreak of the Iranian conflict caused a massive energy shock, as we all know. Swaps versus outright sales. Economists noted that about half of the drawdown was used in gold for foreign currency or lira swap agreements. So basically, it's saying that, yeah, we're putting this gold up for sale, but we want to get it back again here pretty soon. So make that available to us. Rebuilding reserves. Following temporary regional, this is going to be, by the way, really important. I know it's a little bit technical here today, and I don't really go in for technical stuff, but this is important. Following temporary regional de-escalation, market conditions stabilized, allowing the Central Bank of Turkey to quickly begin rebuilding its gold reserves. That's the point of the swap. Global market shock. Because Turkey's sales exceeded the outflows of all global gold-backed ETFs over the same 2-week period, it became the largest single source of gold liquidation worldwide. That's a big deal. But there's something deeper behind that I want to show you today. Sound money strategy. Analysts have pointed out that Turkey didn't sell gold because the metal failed, but rather because fiat currency systems, specifically the dollar, fiat currency systems required aggressive intervention. Citizens and the state alike held onto the yellow metal as a hedge against volatility, using its immense value to buy time and stabilize the economy. Okay, but now there's something more. There's let me get to this article. So, the article, this was a YouTube thing, and I pulled part of their text off, and I've whittled on it quite a bit, so I've edited it for flow, but I thought the guy did a really good job of explaining what's really going on behind the scene. He said, now this is a summarized version. they're selling gold to buy diesel. This is Turkey. Turkey's problem is gold was after Turkey sold American government debt and U.S. treasuries. What's going on? If countries are being forced to sell American debt just to keep trucks moving, then Turkey isn't the story. Turkey is just the first crack in the deck, you might say, or the dam, maybe. A lot bigger. Here's what most investors never think about. When you buy U.S. Treasury, you think that you own the safest asset on earth. Well, it used to be, but maybe not anymore. But safe rests on one quiet assumption, and that when you want your money back, somebody will be there to buy the Treasury back from you. So, what happens, therefore, when all the buyers all turn into sellers? That's the point. That's what is now in progress. And you're not going to hear this on the 6 o'clock news. And I thought the guy did a wonderful job of explaining it. So he goes on to say the Strait of Hormuz, 2 years ago, not one analyst on Wall Street had Hormuz closes on their first list. We didn't see it coming. It was a black swan. It was the thing that nobody saw coming, and then it came. Now, 1/5 of all the oil on the planet moves through the strait. So when the supply gets choked, the oil price obviously goes up, supply demand. Higher oil means that they sell the most liquid dollar asset they own, which is U.S. Treasuries. In other words, when a country starts getting tight, they don't sell gold first. They get rid of their U.S. Treasuries. That's an important point, and that's going to help you to understand why the dollar is about to be in serious, serious trouble. So, they sell dollar assets they own, which is treasuries, to raise the cash to buy the diesel. But the pumps are running dry. You need dollars. So they ran out of their U.S. treasuries, or almost. That's what everybody does. They sell the treasuries first. Well, when they sell them, the price goes down. Well, in order for that to happen, the U.S. has got to pay a higher percentage of interest to be able to sell those things. Like, for example, remember Hegseth is asking for 1.5, I believe it's billion, for an increase in the defense spending. Where does he get that money? Well, they have to go out and borrow it. How do they borrow it? They sell U.S. treasuries. Well, that's fine as long as the world is willing to buy them. And in the past, the world has been willing to buy them and to pay a pretty low percentage for them. But what this is saying, this is where it's going. That amount that people, how do I say this? Okay, so I'm a country. I've got some extra money. Where do I put it? Well, surprisingly, gold and silver is not the first place. The first place, to our benefit, is U.S. Treasuries. But as the price, the interest that America is willing to pay to sell that interest, to sell that treasury, if it goes down, it's harder to sell those treasuries. So when they need to borrow money, when America needs to borrow money, where do they borrow it from? They have to raise the interest rate. Now, the problem is when the interest rate gets around 5%, all of a sudden, we don't make enough money as a nation to cover that. So all of a sudden, things melt down. That's the point of where this is going. And apparently, that meltdown is real soon. Let's go on with the article. So they sell to before the price drops even further. It quickly becomes a spiral, like a bank run. Now, who's standing in the middle of the spiral? It's the United States government. It funds itself by selling those same treasuries, as I said, so it needs buyers, not sellers. The middle of the pack countries like India, Turkey, Indonesia, Thailand, others, they have parked their extra money in U.S. treasuries. But the problem is now the price of oil went up to 105. Now this whole thing with the Hormuz Strait, hopefully it's all solved. And if it's all solved, there's a chance that we can make it through this. I want to say that. There's a chance that now is not the time the dollar's going to crash. But we don't know that yet. We don't know. I'm not talking about Iran. I'm not talking about Strait of Hormuz. I'm talking about, for some other reasons I'm about to show you, we don't know if we're past the point of no return yet. We don't know if we're in deep trouble yet. Talking about the dollar. Let's go on. The article's got some important information in it. The price of oil rises. Nations must sell their U.S. treasuries to buy diesel. Imagine you're holding a $1,000 treasury. The price of oil rises. So you tap your piggy bank of U.S. treasuries because the first thing they sell is U.S. treasury. But many of the nations are doing likewise. Many nations over this whole Iran oil deal apparently had to start selling, and the first thing they sell is a treasury note. So the price of U.S. treasuries is dropping. So now you don't get $1,000 for your treasury that you put into it. You only get maybe $950 or maybe $900. A lower treasury price means a higher interest rate the United States now has to pay to attract people that are willing to buy them, supply versus demand. So what happens when there's so many people? Here's where it's going. What happens when there's so many people trying to sell their U.S. treasuries to buy diesel, to buy the things they need, and unfortunately there's no one to buy them? Then if America wants to borrow some more money, and we do, we have to pay a higher interest rate. If we are forced to pay a higher interest rate, and if it gets up too close to 5, then the whole thing starts to melt down. I personally believe that Trump has a plan to move us into a digital currency system and throw all of this problem on the back of all of the world in the new currency system. That's what I think is going to happen. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen that way, and it doesn't necessarily have to happen that way immediately. It could be that the dollar's about to melt down, like the prophecies say. I'd like to think we could avoid it, but I can't guarantee that. So Turkey sold 90% of its treasuries in a single month. That's big. That was not enough, though. Turkey sold or swapped another 58, or about $8 billion worth of gold. So are you saying Turkey's in trouble? But it's not just Turkey. And it's just not over gold. It's because they're selling treasuries. And that means the value of the dollar is falling even more. In the last 12 to 18 months, the dollar has fallen by 50%. How do you know that? Well, because the price of gold has gone up by 50%. Silver even higher. So you know that gold does not go up in price. Gold is a standard. Like Abraham Lincoln said, in his days, a 1 ounce gold coin would buy you a pretty nice set of clothes. Today, a 1 ounce gold coin will buy you a pretty nice set of clothes. Meaning the price of gold doesn't change. It's the value of the dollar that goes down that makes a difference. I've told you before, when I was all the way through elementary, high school, everything, my mom gave me 2 quarters, and that bought me a hamburger, french fries, and a Coke. Today, I just checked, it's $17 to buy the same hamburger, french fries, and Coke. What happened? The dollar value has gone down. That's what happened. Now let me go on. And that was 3 months ago. The bleed hasn't stopped. The country does not start selling its gold. That's what it means. Gold. It made a mistake there. It's gold to buy diesel unless it has run out of better options. Nobody is further down the road than Turkey. And this isn't a forecast, right? It's reported in books as an already happened fact. This is not the only article saying this. Matter of fact, there are many articles saying this. If you're wondering what a country running out of dollars looks like, well, it happened to Sri Lanka back in 2022. What happened? Sri Lanka imports almost everything, food, medicine. It's all purchased with dollars. The biggest source of those dollars by far was tourism, more than 5% of the entire economy. But when 2020, the COVID thing happened, tourism basically stopped. So the country had to start selling its U.S. treasuries. Foreign reserves went from $7.6 billion at the end of 2019 down to only $50 million. That's a lot. By the spring of 22, exactly the way these emerging markets are draining theirs today. That's the red line we've crossed, apparently. And when the savings run out, that meant no more dollars in the country. That runs out of dollars, runs out of the things that dollars buy. The fuel lines in Sri Lanka stretched for literally miles till finally they ran out of gasoline. Try to imagine that. The power went off for hours every single day. Medicine got scarce. Food prices went through the roof. And the July ordinary people had had enough. What'd they do? They marched on the presidential palace. They were threatening to kill the president. He had to flee overnight to get out of it. Stan, are you saying that's going to happen? I don't think it's going to get that bad. But I got 12 prophecies saying the dollar dies, and it's from credible people. So the United States is draining its strategic petroleum reserve, the national emergency tank that one you only ever crack open in a true crisis. War. And they're doing it actually at the fastest pace on record. Why? Because they're selling it to the world because they can't get it through the Hormuz Strait. However, now reportedly, that's been fixed, at least now for probably 3 or 4 days by the time you get this. But that has not fixed the problem yet, okay? A lot of that fuel, the majority, isn't going to Americans. It's being shipped overseas. We are selling our oil reserves to the world so that the world can continue. And frankly, if you ask me, I think that's one of the reasons. I think Trump has got the best deal he can get out of the Iranians. I think Iranians knew that they had the world over a barrel. They knew that they had the world around the neck. There was a noose around their neck, and it was getting tighter. But Iran also knew that we're a pretty big military power, and we could destroy them if we wanted to. So I think Trump probably got the best deal he could get, but he's got to get that strait opened. He's got to. It's shutting down the whole world, just like the Iranians know. They've quietly lifted their sanctions on Russian oil. Now, this is talking about America. Not once, but twice in the middle of the war in which Russia is helping target American forces. So why on earth would America remove the sanctions off the Russian oil? Why? Because that oil's got to get out there, or there'll be more countries going belly up. There's more of them selling the U.S. treasuries, and that kills the U.S. dollar. That's the bottom line. That's where this is really all going. Meaning, so we thought, we were watching for the dollar to die, and many of the prophecies about it dying has already come to pass. But it didn't die when Saudi Arabia stopped requiring the dollar to purchase oil. Came pretty close. But now, the world's not talking about this, but we could very easily see between now and the end of July, God has not told me, I'm not making a prediction, okay? But based upon this, another article I hope to get to today, we could very easily see the death of the dollar by the end of July. And I've been saying I suspect strongly that we're going to get this new currency system probably, now again, I'm just guessing, okay? God has not told me anything. But we could easily get it in July, and it makes sense to me that a lot of the prophecies about us rejoicing in the streets, so many things happening, I've covered that before, all happen on, about, around, or associated with July the 4th. So that's, wow. What I'm saying is, it could be, looking at all the prophecies, it could be that we're about to see the death of the dollar, a new currency system in July, or maybe even as soon as July the 4th. Do I know that? No, I don't. But as watchmen, that's what we're doing. We're watching. So he says, if desperate countries can get oil from America's emergency tank or from suddenly legalized Russian oil, it keeps the global oil price down for a little bit longer, meaning that a lot of the U.S. treasuries are not having to be sold, means that the dollar doesn't have to die as quick. Who thought that the war with Iran could kill the American dollar? But that's what is really going on around the corner here. They're about protecting the treasury market. That's what's really going on. Keeping the most fragile countries from selling so hard that one of them falls and starts the cascade. Yeah, it could be that serious. Now, read that back, because that's the tell. The U.S. government is burning its own emergency reserves and unsanctioned its enemies, all to keep a distant emergency market from going bankrupt. That's the real situation with Iran right now. We're approaching unheard of inventory levels. This is one of the chief leaders of the oil business. We're approaching unheard of inventory levels. Really, really low oil levels, the cushion of the world's been living off of and the sitting on the reserves and the storage tanks around the globe is almost gone. I got another article if I'd get to it on that. August 14th, 2003, a single power line, this is an example, in Ohio was sagging in the summer heat. And it got tangled in the overgrown tree, and minutes later, 55 million people across 8 states and Canada were sitting in the dark. Why? How'd that happen? Just one did. Just one line went down. But when that first line tripped, the power it was carrying didn't vanish. It pushed into the next line, which one then overloaded and tripped, which one then overloaded and tripped the next one, tripped the next one. Each failure made the next one worse until the entire northeast of the continent went down in under 10 minutes. This is how a connected system falls. Not slowly, not with a warning. You can act on or all at once. One domino hitting the next, they all fall, starting with whatever point was carrying the most. I remember David Phillips and several others have said to follow the dollar happens overnight. We've talked about that many times. It doesn't come slowly. We don't see warning. It just, boom, all of a sudden, like Brandon Biggs saw, they confiscate the dollars in our accounts in the banks. They take them all. I know. You're thinking, no, that'll never happen. I hope it doesn't happen, but that is what the prophecies say. And that Brandon Biggs, he's the guy that saw Trump shot in the right ear 3 months before it happened. So you got to give the guy some credit. Now, here's the second article I wanted to get to. This is from Hal Turner, but what I want you to notice is the date. This is May 8th. Okay, so as I'm recording this, this is June 23rd. So we're talking this is roughly 6 weeks ago. And I haven't put it out because, frankly, I didn't believe it. I think it is just too out there. But now all of a sudden, it's maybe it's not too out there. Maybe it's now happening. The article says, 8 weeks to empty shelves, 60 days to famine. What cost it? What you need to do immediately. He says, I've run this research across several large language models. I've cross-referenced every claim against the U.S. Energy and list all the places he's checked. What I'm about to show you is not speculation, it's not opinion, it's documented, sourced, verified trajectory of global oil supply as it exists right now, as of 6 weeks ago. I'm telling you that the data says the United States of America will run out of usable oil by July the 4th. There it is again. July the 4th, 2026. Could it be that this is all orchestrated? Oh, it's orchestrated by Trump. Or it's orchestrated by the oil companies. No, maybe it's orchestrated by the hand of God. Can I say that for sure? No. But I think it's something we got to watch. He says some important things here. He says, okay, May 3rd, 2026, a Hong Kong flagged tanker called the New Corolla docked at the port of Long Beach, California, carrying 2 million barrels of Iraqi crude oil, and on February 24th, 4 days before the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury against Iran, the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed. The tanker was the last one, the last oil shipment from the Middle East to reach American shores. It arrived, unloaded, now it's gone. The buffer that kept the fuel flowing for 2 months, tankers that were already at sea when the war started, is exhausted. Byron Stock, director of the Chevron El Segundo refinery, the largest refinery on the West Coast, called it, quote, a significant milestone that I've not seen or faced in my 27-year career. His refinery normally receives 20% of its crude from Arab Gulf. That supply is gone. California imports roughly 60% of its crude. Roughly 20% of that comes through the Strait of Hormuz. Tank bottoms. I know you never heard of this. I hadn't either. What tank bottoms mean and why it will end your way of life. The senior advisor told Bloomberg Television that the oil storage tanks in Europe will hit tank bottoms sometime in the month of May. In other words, this may have already happened. Excuse me. And in the United States, somewhere in that July the 4th period, he said he has never seen anything like it before. Tank bottoms. What's that? It means the system stops working. Oil storage tanks require a minimum volume of liquid to maintain the pressure that allows the pumps to function. When levels drop below that threshold, the remaining oil becomes physically inaccessible to the pipeline system. It cannot be pumped out. It cannot be moved. The pumps fail. Now, okay, let's say the pumps are now in process of failing. Would we hear about that on the 6 o'clock news? No. No, we aren't going to hear about it until there's nothing coming out of the pump. Till we can't put anything in our gas tank. That's the last time we're going to hear about it, or the first time we're going to hear about it. Below that, the bottom 5 to 10% of the large storage tanks contain sediment, water, paraffin wax, that what the industry calls heavies. If you try to draw from that level, you clog filters, damage refinery equipment. This last volume is not usable without intensive processing that takes weeks. So, when Curie says tank bottoms, he's describing a point where the infrastructure itself fails. This may have already happened in America. The pumps cannot pull. The pipelines cannot deliver. The refineries cannot process. It does not matter what the price is. It does not matter how much money you have. The fuel is physically gone from the system. Now, that's one of the reasons I didn't put this out 6 weeks ago. I just couldn't receive it. I thought, no, this is never going to happen. But now, maybe it's already happened. Which is why I'd recommend 800-200 gold. 800-200 gold. Look, you're standing in line. You've got a loaf of bread. You've also got a pocket full of gold or silver. Which one do you want? Well, the bread's going to run out, but you might be able to buy some more bread or more gold, or not gold, but oil or something like that with the gold and silver. I think having some gold and silver is just a smart thing to do. I can't give you financial advice. There's laws that says I can't do that. But I can say, get on your knees and say, Lord, this is what I said, walked around for probably a week praying it constantly. Lord, show me what I need to do to get prepared. Show me what I need to do to get prepared. And he'll show you. He'll show you. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. God is there. He'll never leave us nor forsake us. 800-200 gold, 800-200-4653. Especially if you have an IRA or 401k. This dollar crashes like 12 people have been told it will. One of the things you're going to wish you had is gold and silver. Remember, Shane Warren was told in an audible voice that silver will skyrocket far more than gold. Maybe that can't convince you. Maybe what you need to do is call them. Maybe they can't convince you. Now's the time to get, and that's fine. But maybe they call, and maybe they start asking some questions, getting you thinking. Maybe they make some statements. Maybe they tell you something that you didn't know, and all of a sudden you say, oh my goodness, I should have already done this months ago. Maybe I should have done this years ago. How quickly can I get into this? 800-200-4653. 800-200-4653. So this is a book called Miss the Mark, and this one is a very simple book. Takes you probably 2 hours to read through it. It is designed to be handed to someone that is not necessarily a Christian, maybe even a teenager, because if they'll read a few pages of it, they will probably finish the book. And if they finish the book, they will understand the mark of the beast. It shows them what the mark of the beast looks like, and they will never take the mark of the beast, and they'll probably get saved. 1 for $20, don't do that. We offer them a shrink wrap set of 10 for $35. Then my newest book, Pentecost Rapture of the Bride. If you want to understand the timing of the rapture, and I'll just tell you, it's what you call pre-wrath. It's about 4 months before Armageddon. Then this is the book. And it lays it out once again. This is simple. This is about a 3-hour read. Not complicated at all. But once you read it, you'll slap your forehead and say, of course. I don't know why I didn't see this before. It has to be this way. This is the truth. No matter whether you or someone else is pre-trib, post-trib, whatever they are, when they read this book, they will understand the truth about the rapture. Essentially, it explains that the Feast of Pentecost is the marriage feast. And so the first marriage, Moses, the children of Israel, married God at Mount Sinai. The second marriage in the upper room, when the Holy Spirit came in and tongues of fire set upon people. The final marriage is when we get taken to the marriage supper of the Lamb on the last rapture. You'll see that. It's easy. 1 for 20. Don't do that. Shrink wrap set of 10 for 35. Then what I call the granddaddy book, this is the one where I was shown the secret door that puts the prophecies of Revelation into the correct chronological order based upon the feasts. When you see this, you can say, of course, God showed him how it really works. 1 for 20, shrink wrap set of 5 for 35. But you can right now get 5 of the secret door and 10 of the Pentecost, 15 books for a gift of $50 at prophecyclub.com. Prophecyclub.com has the best offer we've ever offered, where you get all 5 of my books, total of 40 books, at prophecyclub.com for $800, valued at $800, for $100. Also, if you are a prophecy student and you are in the DFW area, or especially if you live in the DFW area, let me invite you to come by our church and visit. I think you'll like it, especially if you're a prophecy student and you see the address there. If God has blessed you and you can help Prophecy Club, now would be a really, really good time, because it's summertime and it's always the toughest time of the year. Our donations pretty much stop during this year for the time of the year. So if you can help us, now would be a really good time. We'd really appreciate it.